Je pense qu'on peut commencer cette réunion. Je vais...
I think we can get started on today's meeting, which I'll be chairing in French.
For a second, okay, I switch to English. Fine. You're so convincing. You're so convincing. So first, we have to adopt the agenda. I guess there is no objection. No specific chair's announcements beyond the usual ones. So we can directly move to the exchange of views with Executive Vice President Frans Timmermans. Welcome, Frans, to this ENVI meeting on the effect of the war in Ukraine, on climate policies, on the Green Deal, on our energy security, on food prices, and so on. Because as a reminder, you have under your umbrella as Executive VP for Green Deal, of course, climate, but also energy and agriculture. So when you look at all these impacts on the everyday life, on prices, on security, on supply, and so on, and on the investment choices that are ahead of us, you have a very important responsibility on that front with an S. So a lot of expectations tonight, and very happy to give you the floor for the time you need, and then, of course, the usual round of questions.
Thank you very much, Chair. Honourable members, our world has changed since 12 days now. Europe will never be the way it was before. Any illusions anyone might have had about the nature of Putin's intentions, about how he sees the world, things we could have known for many years, but we thought he might not act upon, have now materialized. And this means that we will have to take a different look at how we organize ourselves, how we organize our collective security, how we strengthen our resilience, and how we strengthen our response. Because, of course, today our thoughts are with the people in Ukraine who are suffering in this unbearable war, with acts of barbarism unleashed upon them, providing them with the illusion of safe corridors to Russian territory, of course, and then mining the safe corridors. I mean, there's no way you can take cynicism to a higher level than what the Russians are doing right now. So we need to find the most concrete possible expression of our solidarity with the suffering Ukrainian people. We need to respond to this challenge. Putin, if he is not stopped, will continue until he has restored what he thinks is the rightful Russian empire. And I'm afraid this is not limited to Ukraine. So I think I want to start on this because, as some of you know, I've lived in Russia. I've been following the country very closely for the last 3 decades. I have friends in Russia. I have friends in Ukraine, like many of us here. There is no Russian who wants this war. And the Ukrainians are forced into a conflict with people whom they regard as their brothers and sisters. This is Putin's war. And it should be on him and on his cronies. And we have a huge responsibility in making sure he does not succeed. This has to be and will be his Waterloo. Now, in the reaction to this, of course, the main task any public authority has is to fight for the security of our citizens. And that means looking again at our collective security arrangements, strengthening European security, strengthening our transatlantic ties. I want to refer to the historic introduction in the Bundestag by Chancellor Scholz Sunday a week ago, where he just recognized that we are in a completely new situation and responded to that. And the whole idea of what in German is called Wandel durch Handel has been abandoned. And we need to stand up for our values. This is an ideological confrontation with someone who despises us for our values and at the same time fears us for our values, because there's a lot of talk about NATO this, NATO that, but he fears the EU more than he fears NATO, because he knows his citizens want what we have and not what he's offering in the long run. Now, immediately moving, of course, to the subject why I'm here. I think it would be a historic mistake to draw the conclusion from this security challenge and saying this means the Green Deal and Fit for 55 can go to the back burner. We had a bit of that 2 years ago with COVID, also some quarters the first reaction. COVID now, come back with your Green Deal in 10 years' time, and then soon we discovered that the Green Deal offered some of the fundamental answers we needed to respond to the challenge, that has been going into our economy, to the need to make our economy more resilient and sustainable, and to use the opportunities of the digital revolution. And I would argue that we are in a comparable situation. The only way that we cannot be put under pressure because we are Putin's customer is to no longer be his customer for our essential energy resourcing. The only way to achieve that is to speed up our transition to renewable energy resourcing. Make our own energy is the best answer. To do more in offshore wind, to do more in solar, to do more in hydrogen, to do more in biomethane. To, of course, diversify also our energy resourcing for the time being, as long as we still need fossil fuel, by signing contracts with outside parties to provide us with this energy. We also need to speed up investments in the built environment so that energy consumption is truly reduced, and therefore also energy bills of our citizens can be reduced. I believe this is of utmost importance, that we understand that the Green Deal and Fit for 55 have not become less urgent, but arguably even more urgent because of the challenge now thrown to us, because we cannot be in a situation where we depend on Russian energy that would come with strings attached, as clearly it is now. So this transition needs to be sped up. We can do this. We will present plans tomorrow to you also to show how we can do this. So we need to make sure, as I said, that we diversify our resourcing as long as we need still fossil fuels, that we speed up our transition to renewables, that we provide for relief for our citizens that are suffering too much under high energy prices, that we also make sure that we will be ready for the next winter, because this winter will be okay. We're lucky enough to have a mild winter, but you can't bank on that. So for next year, we need to make sure that our reserves, our stocks are up to 80 or 90%, so that we can face that challenge. And for that, we will need also to diversify. So I believe that is important. Agriculture is another subject. You mentioned it, Chair, at the beginning. Please, please don't believe in the illusion that helping food production, that you would help food production by making it less sustainable, by not opting for farm-to-fork strategies, by not making it more resilient in terms of the natural environment and the food production. We need to reduce our dependency of potash coming from elsewhere, including Russia and Belarus, so that we need to reduce the fertilizers we need. We need to reduce the pesticides we need, etc., etc. So also here I would argue that farm-to-fork is part of the answer and not part of the problem. And I'm more than willing to discuss this, but I'm sure also other committees in this Parliament would want to discuss that. And then finally, I believe that if we make the right choices in the days and months to come, we will overcome this challenge. We will be able to convince our citizens that continuing opting for the transition to renewables, continuing to opt for the Green Deal and Fit for 55 is in their interest. But we will be convincing if this is perceived by our citizens as fair to them. And therefore, I believe making sure we address the issue of energy poverty by providing the instruments to our member states to do that, but also by developing European policies that would allow us to address the risk of energy poverty is an essential prerequisite, not an accompanying element of Fit for 55 or the Green Deal, but an essential prerequisite to convince our citizens to go this path together. And I believe that because energy is such an essential element in our society, to heat our houses, to fuel our cars, to do all these things to keep our society working and sticking together, we need to keep that in mind. Because if we fail on this score, we will create ourselves the divisions in our society that Putin invested so much in over 20 years and has now seen have gone to naught. Because all those who've been his best friends, and we know some of them also in this Parliament, now are all of a sudden very silent. But I would say, own it. Own it. Own what you've said all these years. Own it. Because you are the ones who did his bidding in creating divisions in our society. No more. We will stand united. But I repeat, we can only do that if our citizens understand that we're acting in their interest and that we will make sure that nobody is left behind. Thank you.
Thank you very much for these strong words. So we move now to the first round of questions. You have 2 minutes each, as there are many members willing to have the floor. Please stick to the time allocated. So we start with EPP and Peter Liese.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Executive Vice President. In fact, the situation is dramatic, and Putin's aggression is a huge challenge for all of us. And I really think nothing is the same than 2 weeks ago. I fully agree, Fit for 55 is a solution and not the problem. So to speed up renewables, to speed up energy efficiency is important and urgent. And I'm very happy that the EPP rapporteur for renewables put on the table last Thursday his position to increase ambition from 40% to 45%. Personally, I think we should do the same with energy efficiency, increase our ambition. However, in short term, unfortunately, I think we need to make some compromises also as environmental politicians. I was against any longer use of nuclear in Germany until 2 weeks ago. Now I think let's look at it. For 2-3 years, it must be possible. I think it will be possible. I don't think nuclear is a solution in the long term, not at all, but for short term, maybe. And the same applies for coal. We are phasing out our own coal. That's a member states issue, but it should be put in perspective. And importing coal from Russia, that must stop. Food production, you are right. Imported fertilizers from Russia increase the problem. But there are other elements of our policy where we may have to help farmers to produce the food that we will not get from Ukraine or from Russia. So let's all of our corner and let's work together. And let's not be afraid that Putin stops any deliverer. Let's be prepared. Also for the energy imports, we need to be prepared if he stops, and we need to be able also to put a lot of more pressure. And the first thing that we all can do, consume less immediately. Every ton of oil or gas or what you save is hurting Putin, and what you consume will finance the war. I think that we need to take into account. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We move to Timo Wolken for SND.
The Executive Vice President Timmermans, lieber Franz, I today speak in German. Es gibt historische Momente, die
historical moments which change how we live, how we work together, and what we've believed in the past. And this criminal attack from Putin in such a moment, the response to this war in the middle of Europe has to be a change in our energy policy. We have to free ourselves from this. Capitalism is born from English coal, and then we've had millions of, and it's made millions of people dependent on coal, yet made a few people rich. We're dependent on the resources that are in the hands of very few people. So we have to have a democratization of energy. We have to, otherwise we see wars of being funded by energy. That has to belong to the past. We have to work together. We have to reduce our dependency on petroleum products, on gas, on coal. We have to reduce our dependency on Putin's energy sources, which finances wars. So we have to have, however, investments in gas and nuclear can't be sustainable. We have to rethink the taxonomy. And it's also because atomic energy can be used as a goal in such a war. So we have to focus on renewable energy. We have to focus on increasing energy efficiency. And we have to see on every roof a solar panel. And we have to reduce imports of oil from Russia, because that's where Putin is earning his money. So my question to the Commission is feasibility of having a reduction or stop of oil imports from Russia. And also, what about this situation with reduction of imports of grain and the use of grain for energy? Thank you very much.
Thank you. We move to Niels Torvalds for Renew.
Thank you, Pascal, and thank you, Vice President Timmermans, for being here. When we spoke about energy, I think it was in Envy in November, you said that one of the most difficult parts of the whole transition is energy, because it's so complicated. And now we are, with that complicated issue, slightly against the wall. Therefore, we need from the Commission as soon as possible, first, what can be speeded up and in which way? Because the ways are different. So you don't have one solution for gas and one solution for oil and one solution for nuclear. You need, and depending on the member state structure, you need different answers in all the cases. Two, what kind of bridging solutions do we have? And do we need? For how long time? For 1 year, in some cases, for 2 years in some cases, probably in 3 years or 4 years in some cases. But we need to have a structure of how this is going to be look. And as I said before, as the structures in the different member states are very different, and some of them are very dependent on Russia because of the infrastructure built during socialist times. So we need one size doesn't fit everybody in this, and we need as concrete examples as possible from the Commission. And just to add up in the very beginning, of all the countries in Europe, the longest border with Russia is, of course, the Ukrainian, 2,000 kilometer border. The second longest border is Finland's. And we don't have any backbone of NATO. And still we decided to send weapons to Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you. We move to, we move to the Greens and Bas Eickhout.
Thank you very much. And first of all, thank you very much, Mr. Timmermans, Frans, for the strong words against what's happening now. And I think you're absolutely right that we are living in a new era after these 2 weeks. And that will indeed also have consequences for our policies for sure, and I'm happy that you are also making very clear that this is another plea for the Green Deal targets to reduce our dependency of fossil imports. But I would like to know a bit more concrete on what we can expect there, because I've been looking into the impact assessments again of the Fit for 55 package, which is sometimes an interesting read if you go back to the documents of July. And especially on energy efficiency, if you look at all the ambitious elements in the impact assessment, the negative points were on administrative burden and subsidiarity, whereas it was putting a lot of pluses on effectiveness. And I think that should now be the driving force of policies, effectiveness, because the energy we do not use, we don't need to import, we don't need to replace. And I think this is really, for me, one of the key proponents that I hope we can see in tomorrow's proposal, because the impact assessments are there. All the proposals the Commission has calculated through, but back then you were more going for the middle option, which is, we can always do that. But I think now, if we look at effectiveness, that should be our key driver. And I think that is indeed what, with the impact assessment in hand, could really already tomorrow, we could expect from the Commission kind of changes in the targets, both on efficiency and on renewable. Because if I read the impact assessment on renewables, it was against the higher target of 40%, was because it was overshooting the climate target. I don't see the problem. And a lack of coherence with other instruments. I think that's also not the biggest concern anymore. So this really drives us in looking differently at our analysis. And I'm very much curious on how you see that. Also, our analysis on a lot of the kind of gas as a transition. How will this change that narrative also within the Commission and its analysis? Thank you very much.
Thank you. We move to ID Silvia Sardone.
Grazie. L'assurda guerra in Ucraina non...
Thank you. The absurd war in Ukraine is not just a humanitarian disaster, it's also a disaster for our energy crisis. The European Union has spent the last few years with an obsession and has lost time to do with issues such as plastic straws. In the past years, we have imported an awful lot of gas from Russia, and we have failed in our quest for renewables. Now, with a war in course, every day Russia is paid $500 million for fossil fuels. Focusing on 100% renewables is a waste of time now, because we won't manage to achieve it for several decades. Renewables are not an immediate solution. And we also lack storage capacity for them. There isn't much time. The Green Deal objectives will need to be looked at. Again, we need a new plan. We could focus more on renewables, but what about today? What about tomorrow? What about exorbitant bills for citizens? We need a proper policy here which takes into account our citizens. Furthermore, we have to stop thinking about ideas which we can't really achieve, but focus on the right energy mix which will ensure that we have energy autonomy. We have to simplify the procedures for renewables. Moreover, you have said to the media with a certain amount of chutzpah that some kind of approach involving fossil fuels might be necessary. Don't you think it's time to rethink this? Thank you.
For ECR, Alexander Vondra.
Thank you. You are a great speaker, and you are right that the world has changed. But then with the rest, I think it's not enough. What are you thinking? You know, we must think more radical. The world is gone, which we love. We are entering in an era of the real Machtpolitik, because, you know, I expect that we are not going to conquer Kremlin and to kill him. So we will have to coexist with Russia as it is, and not with Russia as we would wish to. We would have China, we would have India, we would have South Africa, or were abstaining in the General Assembly this week. So it's no more about the values. It's about the values at home. But we don't have the partners. We don't have the partners for CBAM. Would you trust Putin, with his CBAM certificate? Would you expect China would play the same game with us? No way. India, no way. So look, we should abandon this carbon ideology, because the goal for us is to survive next 3 winters and not to speculate about the sea level rise by 3 centimeters in 2050. We need to survive next 3 winters. We would need to exploit the coal further because we will not have gas. But we are even not able to do this without the gas in the next couple of winters. So we would need expensive gas from Qatar and other sources. We need to restructure ETS, because the goal is not to make a party at home, because we are entering into an era of great inflation. Yes, security must be the guiding principle in the Green Deal. I agree with you that the renewables would certainly help. I would even agree with you that we should speed up, solar and wind system, but it's not enough. Especially in winter, you need to compensate, when there is no wind, where there is no sun. I would expect from the Commission much more than just, speeding up what we are. The world has changed, but, we should change our mind too. Thank you.
Thank you. We move to the left. Petros Kokalis.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Executive Vice President Mr. Timmermans as well. Mr. Vondra spoke on survival, and there is, as we know, a brief but rapidly closing window to secure a livable future. The warning of the IPCC last week, unfortunately, holds true for the humanitarian corridors for civilians that abandon their lives and their cities, which are bombed by Russia with bombs for which we pay for. We pay over 660 million euros every day, which is 13 billion a month. And this has to stop. And as we must not allow ourselves to be hostages to Russia's imperial aggression, we must neither allow Europeans to become hostages to speculators and war profiteers in markets that are neither efficient nor free, but clearly broken. So, as in the pandemic, our response has shown that we can shed taboos, we can move rapidly, and in union, invest in our common future. In renewables, in efficiency, in smart grids that would deliver jobs and results now. This is not the time to revive fossils, and there is no such thing as a short-term fossil play. The Green Deal is above all a peace deal. It's a weapon against aggression, it's a weapon against climate catastrophe, it's a weapon for freedom and democracy, it's a weapon for development. A massive wartime peace mobilization to deliver effectiveness, as Bas called it. So I would like to ask you more about your ideas about providing the idea of fairness, because this cannot be done only on the supply side, it has to be done on the demand side. And we are not all equal in this carbon world. So I would like to hear more about how we'll protect social cohesion, how we'll protect our citizens in the coming months, and I would like to thank you for your commitment to the Green Deal. This is the only way forward.
Thank you. And before giving you the floor back, France, Christian Bouzoy as the chair of ITRE committee.
Thank you so much, Pascal, for inviting me to take the floor. Thank you, Executive Vice President Timmermans, and also thanks to the Commission in general for the extensive exchange of views that the Commission is having with the Parliament on Ukrainian crisis. We also had a discussion in ITRE committee last week on the energy aspects related to the Ukrainian war, to the Russian invasion over Ukraine, and I should express the commitment of my colleagues who I represent here to find ways to support the fight of Ukrainian people for their land, for their security, and for peace within our respective remits. We should not fall in the trap of the false dichotomy of Green Deal versus security of supply. Not only for saving our planet, but also to achieve a high degree of energy independence, we need to boost an energy mix formed by a majority of renewable, zero, low-carbon sources. This is the way forward. We have a long-term plan, the Green Deal, let's stick to it. On the other hand, of course, we need to take immediate measures to ensure that Russian gas is replaced by gas from other sources. There are immediate problems requiring immediate solutions. We need to increase our interconnections levels between member states so the gas stored can flow where it's really needed. We should also ensure that our gas stocks are replenished to ensure that next winter's supply are ensured. And of course, we should stop allowing operators from Russia or other unreliable countries to enter in the EU energy market, giving them possibilities to endanger our security of supply. We should strive to avoid replacing gas supplies by other sources with higher emissions. And of course, we need to support the efforts of ENTSO-E to carry out an emergency synchronization of the power grid of Ukrainians with ours, and we should strive to increase reverse flow capacity towards the east. Finally, of course, we need to take a decision on the Fit for 55 package. We should continue not forget our long-term objectives, but also to be flexible and on the medium term to take into account the economic situation that maybe will be worsened by this war. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Of course, we will put Parliament and Council in a position to increase ambition if Parliament and Council on the targets we've set. So this is an answer to the question Peter Liese put, and Timo as well asked me. So we want to do that tomorrow, to give Parliament and Council the opportunity to sort of tighten the screws on the energy transition issues, on the targets we have set. I think this is an important thing we should be doing now. In terms of energy sourcing, and let me be very clear on this, I could understand that some member states who had in their planning seen natural gas as a transitional energy carrier, moving away from coal through natural gas to renewables. I could understand, they say, well, wait a minute, natural gas, would that mean that we would be more dependent on Russia? Could we not skip that? I think it is not impossible to skip that. If you have a higher ambition on your renewables target, speed that up, then perhaps you can indeed, with a small prolongation of coal, end up with renewables earlier, and then the bottom line would be that you would do our climate a favour and reduce emissions and not increase. So in that context, I have said that because of what's now happening in Russia, there are no taboos in the choices member states can make, which does not discharge them from the legal responsibility to reach at least 55% emissions reduction in 2030 and climate neutrality in 2050. But it is a sovereign choice of the member states to say, okay, we'll stick a bit longer with nuclear or we'll stick a bit longer with coal, but we will compensate that by introducing renewables earlier so that we don't have a negative impact on our emissions development. So that's the context within which I said things have changed. Things have really radically changed. I think we can present a plan tomorrow, I hope it at least, and I'm pretty confident we can, that will substantially reduce our dependency on Russian gas already this year, and within years will make us independent of the import of Russian gas. I think that's possible. It's not easy, but it's feasible, and I hope to be able to present that to you tomorrow. This is, I think, a collective effort that nobody would dispute. Things can be sped up. Also, the quantity of LNG imported can be increased. There will be new LNG terminals. Some member states don't want them. Others are now. Germany has announced 2. Others may also be happening. We need to improve our interconnectors. We need to do that. There is still a lack of interconnection in that energy field in Europe that we need to improve so that we back each other up when it is necessary and that not a single member state gets into trouble. The question Niels Torvalds asked about bridging solutions for how long, that is a really crucial question, and I tried to explain earlier, you know, the only way to reduce the bridging problem is by speeding up the transfer to renewables. And when I say renewables, there's so much more we can do in rooftop solar than we're doing now. So much more that we could do there, and we will make some proposals for that. There's also so much more we can do in improving the energy efficiency of buildings. And most of the recovery plans of the member states foresee an investment in that. And I believe we need to look also, when you look at solar panels and you need refurbishing of buildings, we need to look at especially the buildings provided for people with lower incomes. I think that should be a top priority across the EU. We can also do much more in increasing the charging infrastructure along our roads. The car industry is moving at lightning speed towards electrifying their production. Alexander will like the fact that the most sold electric car in the Netherlands is a Skoda Enyaq. That's the #1 now. So, you know, also the Czech car industry has a wonderful future in making electric cars. So these are things that we can do, and then REPowerEU will look into all these issues. And I agree with Bas Eickhout. We need to look at our analysis in a different way in light of where we are now. And that is what we're putting actually tomorrow on the table. And of course, we know that co-legislators will actually decide about turning the screws on increasing our ambitions, but we will certainly want to make proposals in that area. Now, let us. I mean, it's almost unnecessary to say it in this group, but I have to say it because of what Ms. Sardone said. The high energy prices are not a result of the Green Deal. They have very little to do with the Green Deal. The emissions trading system has very little to do with it. And by the way, the prices have gone down. This is an issue of international tensions, and it's an issue of shortage of supply in the market, combined with a war. That is the reason for the high prices. And frankly, I don't feel I need to apologize, not to someone in whose party only recently it was sort of seen as very nice to wear T-shirts with Mr. Putin's face on it. Moving to what Alexander Vondra said about carbon ideology, I think it is fair to say that part of the adventurism that Putin has now engaged in is also linked to the fact that Russia is one of the most unprepared countries. Russia is one of the most unprepared countries in terms of the energy transition that is coming. Most other energy-producing nations are preparing for a post-hydrocarbon world. They are not. They are not. And that is making the system very, very nervous indeed. On that country is suffering terribly from the climate crisis. Terribly. The disappearance of permafrost has a devastating effect on the energy sector infrastructure in Russia. And I'm not even talking about the failed harvests and the wildfires that they've been suffering. So, of course, we are faced with a new security challenge. But please, Alexander, don't forget that the other challenge that we face, which is an existential challenge, is the climate crisis. And if we don't contain the rise of the temperature, conflicts will flourish everywhere. And I think it's CIPRI who made an analysis that over half or 60 or even more % of the global conflicts today have a climate element in them. whether it's a shortage of water or failed harvest or unlivable temperatures, etc., etc. So these crises are completely intertwined, and we cannot neglect one for the sake of tackling the other. We don't have that luxury. Oh boy, I would love that luxury. But we don't have it. We don't have the luxury. We have a responsibility towards our citizens to protect them now that we are threatened by Putin. But we also have a responsibility towards our children and grandchildren to protect them and their future. And for that we need to continue with our climate policy. That's not a carbon ideology. That's not an anti-carbon ideology. We're being scientific about this. Those who refuse science are being ideological about this. And finally, the issue of fairness, Petros, is the crucial issue which will determine whether we succeed or fail. The more I work on this, the more I understand that if we want to convince our citizens to be part of what is the most profound transition in 200 years, they have to see that there's something in it for them. And as we see now in this, citizens are prepared to take a hit, are prepared to sacrifice, but only if they see the benefits of that sacrifice for themselves, for their children or grandchildren. And we still have a long way to go until we have convinced everyone. After all these years of austerity and after all these years of difficulty, socioeconomic difficulty, you know, I think of my own kids, the oldest now 35. They've went from crisis to crisis in their adulthood. And we need to convince them that this is a transition that we will make in a fair way. I think this is the crucial element. Hence, our ideas about a climate social fund and other ways of compensating our citizens, for which we will also put the instruments on the table tomorrow in our communication.
Thank you. So I formally open the Catch the Eye, but there is already a long list, so don't rush. We move to so we start with the second round, and the Catch the Eye will be the third round. We start with Mr. Buzek for 1 minute, and please stick to the time allocated to you.
Grazie Presidente, ringrazio il Vicepresidente.
Thank you very much to Mr. Timmermans for being here and for what he said. I'll be brief, just a few comments. We have to do everything we can to reduce our dependence on Russian gas, and we have to implement measures in the short term which will have an immediate effect and which will allow us to ensure industrial continuity in countries which are very dependent on gas, and that's something which we need to bear in mind in our responses to this crisis, which, well, perhaps was foreseeable, but which is nonetheless extremely serious. We need to set out a pathway, renewables, hydrogen, energy efficiency, and so on. These are things perhaps which we haven't done enough about, and now is the opportunity to move forward. We also need to think about specific measures to have an effect on prices of energy, or special measures for greater European solidarity to help people to tackle the differences that exist in different countries, for example, when it comes to storage, and hopefully that can be done more quickly. Now, on the gas package, which will involve a regulation and a directive on compulsory storage, perhaps, we have written to the relevant commissioner to make our views clear on that. Thank you.
First ones to be penalized. So we are back to Jerzy Buzek, if he's available.
Yes, I am here. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. President, for your presence with us tonight. We all agree we are in quite a new era today. If I may, first remark. Of course, we have to move forward with our Green Deal, as its main sense is a move away from the fossil fuels, and today a move away from Russia's fossil fuels as soon as possible. We need a roadmap of that, month by month, or year by year, or an EU target for the fossil fuels supplies diversification. I agree, Russia is the biggest enemy of our Green Deal. But my second remark, I welcome your statement, Mr. President, with regard to coal or nuclear. There are no taboos today. There should be also no taboos on ETS market manipulation. We have to address it urgently by limiting presence of financial institutions on this market. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We move to Lidia Pereira for EPP.
Thank you very much, Chair, dear colleagues and Mr. Vice President. Well, the war in Ukraine, we heard it tonight, it's outrageous, and we must be unbending in the defense of the Ukrainian sovereignty and its citizens' right to choose their own future. But it's also clear that the situation has changed over the last 2 weeks. And the EU must get rid of its dependency on fossil fuels while maintaining a well-functioning energy market in order to reach strategic autonomy. In any case, to achieve it, we need to improve the energy interconnections, and as you rightly mentioned briefly today, between the Iberian Peninsula and the rest of the European Union. And this shall be done not through gas pipelines that increase our fossil fuels dependency, but crucially through electrical connections. So, Mr. Vice President, the increase of electricity interconnection capacities between France, Spain and Portugal is at least since February 2003, and I repeat, 2003, has been a listed priority in the Council on guidelines for trans-European energy networks. So, Mr. Timmermans, look us in the eyes and tell us what concrete steps and decisions can we expect from the European Commission on this front. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We move to SND, Marek Bolt.
Dziękuję, panie przewodniczący. Rosja nie tylko zaatakowała Ukrainę.
Thank you, Chair. Russia did not only attack Ukraine.
Ale i
Russia did not only attack Ukraine, but it also threatened Europe with nuclear arms, and it attacked our energy security. That is why I'd like to appeal to the Commission to support activities in order to take over the assets of Russian energy companies who finance the war. We need to do it to secure our energy security. Now a question to you. Now, in a situation of unstable supplies of gas and oil, will there be an agreement by the Commission to finance investment that improved energy effectiveness of the current heat sources, also based on fossil fuels such as coal, by increasing co-generation and tri-generation? Every country has its own specificity. That is why I invite you to Poland, where you can revert huge heat plants in order to produce heating for big cities. It means that CO2 will be diminished thanks to such change. We can do it in a short time in order to have the right level of security before we construct the right number of green sources of energy.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Timmermans, for being here. This event has thrown us into one of Europe's greatest crises in modern time. However, the climate crisis is also one of the major crises, not in the future generations, it's in my generation. And many of the solutions of the climate crisis are the same as the geopolitical crisis. So I 100% support you in that we need to stick to the Green Deal goals and the targets. But we also need to do what is necessary to end this war, and that is stop the imports of natural gas and oil from Russia. Not in 1 year. It should be tomorrow. So your plan tomorrow should be to cut the imports of the gas tomorrow. But I will ask you instead, the high energy prices affecting, how will that affect our upcoming work with the Green Deal? How will you keep the member states motivated and stick to the ambition level and raise the ambition level of the Green Deal? Will you review the impact assessments? And also, do you believe that the latest PCI list, that investing more money in the EU gas infrastructure will help us to reduce gas dependency? And finally, last week, the IEA pointed at large sources of bioenergy unused in Europe that could help us replace gas. How will you utilize that and further encourage use of bioenergy in Europe? Thanks.
Thank you. For EPP, Liudas Mazilis.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Mr. Vice President, brutal aggression of Russia against Ukraine proves us in at least two things. First, the energy independence from Russia is to achieve as soon as possible. Every day we pay hundreds of millions for gas, oil and coal. We seek to reduce in a long-term perspective, but now we are increasingly contributing to the Russian war machine. What can we do immediately? Another worrying thing is behavior of Russian military troops seizing personnel of nuclear power plants in Ukraine, threatening the whole energy system. Radioactive contamination of environment can take place at any moment. Moreover, hour after hour, Russian troops are approaching already to the third nuclear power plant after Chernobyl and Zaporizhia. What kind of European answer you think there should be?
Thank you. If you could, yeah. So we move to Marie Toussaint for the Greens.
Merci et bonjour, Monsieur.
Thank you. And good afternoon, Commissioner. We must recognize that the European response to the Ukrainian crisis has been the right one. It has reaffirmed European unity, supporting democracy, and really upholding the European Green Deal objectives to continue. But allow me to express some other points. This discourse is not new. The appeal to give up our energy dependency, particularly on Russia, the interconnectedness, fossil fuels. These are issues we've been talking about for years. We've had many good words on these, and we've had policies, investments in gas infrastructure, which is contributing, in fact, to maintain our dependency on fossil fuels. I have two questions, Commissioner. First, it's not too late to revise the PCI list, is it? The project that you'll be voting on Wednesday, and to propose a list that's 100% renewable. Is this something that you could do? Secondly, we know today that be it gas energy, nuclear energy, the aberration of having green energies in the taxonomy. When we really want to change our position, we have seen good solidarity, refusing gas coming from various different sources, including Total. I think this is really something that we need to welcome for the climate.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you also, Vice President Timmermans, for being here with us today. And I must say that I think your statement from the beginning was very much on the spot. Apart from military forces and nuclear weapons, Europe's fossil fuel dependency on Russia is one of Putin's strongest assets. And I think the way you said it is absolutely clear. We need to be independent and sustainable in the future, and this is the best way of making Russia weaker when it comes to the political situation. The Fit for 55 package is the solution, not only to the last week's alarming IPCC report, but also, as I mentioned, to the energy security, and it must be further improved, I would say, at least in 3 ways. We need to move faster in a range of packages, such as the ETS, RED, and also the CO2 cars. 2, we need sharp drop in the ETS prices, that we see now suggest that we need to strengthen the MSR. And 3, we must once again reconsider the taxonomy delegated acts on the fossil gas. I find that very natural. And therefore, I hope for tomorrow that we have good decisions from the Commission and that we will have a good message. But I would also, of course, like to hear today what, in addition, you are now planning to break out when it comes to the dependency on Russian fossil gas. How fast will we go there? Thank you.
Thank you. We move to Sylvia Lima for ID.
Nach den letzten 2 Wochen erwacht man in den
After the last 2 weeks, the EU member states have simply woken up from this dream of the green transition. It's finally made clear that this green energy means that we're not going to have enough energy for highly developed industrial societies. So this is simply renewable energy, the criticism of fossil and coal. This has certainly made us more dependent on Russia. If we want to be independent, then we don't want to have problems with the raw materials for batteries. We have to look at the Fit for 55 package and completely renegotiate it, because the price for energy is going to stimulate inflation, and our citizens can't pay their bills at the moment. So all more renewables can be used in order to get out of the gas. So faster and avoid what has gotten us into this problem in the first place.
Panie komisarzu, panie przewodniczący.
Mr. Commissioner, Mr. Chair, we are living in hard times. War in Ukraine, 100,000 people of war refugees find shelter in Poland every day. 100,000 people. You are an experienced politician. Your history that you often quote should also make you think that it's time to build this energy security in Europe. We need to stop financing the regime of Putin by giving up 2 Nord Streams. I know it's an ambitious task, but you like ambitious tasks so much. How can we attain it? What should we do? Above all, we need to diversify the supplies of raw materials to Europe. This is a superior objective and a fundamental one. The package Fit for 55 in the situation of a war crisis in Ukraine, which is going to cause high food prices and an increase of inflation in Europe, is something completely unacceptable. People will not stand it. There will be more energy poverty. Is this the aim of climate policy in Europe? Definitely not. What should we bet on, Mr. Commissioner? We should focus very firmly on cogeneration. We should support systemic heating plants. We should support the resources that are at our disposal today. You also need to reform ETS. Thank you.
Kanye for EPP.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Vice President, I think we all agree on the need to counter the aggressor in Ukraine, and obviously we all agree that our top priority shall be energy independence and security. I'm happy that we also agree that we need to increase ambition on renewables, on energy efficiency, on alternative fuels. And yet, a very important question stays pending, and it is why should ETS expand in the present situation, both ETS 1 and ETS 2. ETS provides for controlled increase of the prices in order to incentivize new technologies. Now we have skyrocketing prices. Why should we increase them further? And furthermore, we need our steel and aluminium in war times. We need it dearly. CBAM is at great risk of provoking tensions with our partners in isolating Russia. Increases prices of housing and transport in times of record inflation is going, I'm sorry, against common sense. So I say a big part of the Green Deal is most important today, more important today than it was yesterday. But another part doesn't really make sense.
Thank you. We move to SND, Nikos Androuakis.
Με τραγικό τρόπο, για άλλη μια φορά ένας εξωτερικός. In a tragic way, once again, an external danger is increasing our common misgivings. The illegal and barbarous invasion of the Ukraine shows that our security depends on our energy autonomy. An autonomous Europe should have a common foreign policy and defense, and should be independent from the point of view of energy. We have to create strategic reserves and infrastructure and pipelines such as it, and we should not depend on imported natural gas. We should save gas and should use renewables more, faster. The more we use renewables and we use them in our energy mix, we will be more resilient vis-à-vis crisis. That's why we have to upgrade the national grids and the cross-border interconnections, using new investment measures and using the recovery fund money is a priority. Our joint policies to combat energy inequalities and energy poverty that has increased recently. For tomorrow, the average value of electricity in Greece is 327 euros per megawatt hour, with maximum price 600 euros. This is a crisis that no country can face alone. That's why we need solidarity investment measures and instruments to face rate increases with measures in order to alleviate the weight of our most vulnerable citizens. Thank you.
Gracias, presidente. Gracias, vice.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to the Vice President as well. All of the dangers for the planet which led to the Green Deal are still valid. And so the Green Deal is, of course, the solution. But we've got a new scenario now with a criminal war, which is turning into a massacre of the Ukrainian people. And this means that the whole idea of energy supply and food is going to be affected. So we're going to have a new situation to focus on. And we're also going to have to think about security of energy supply. And we need to draw these things together. And here I'd like to ask the following. Will the Commission give us a proposal with a schedule or a timeline which might involve modifying our objectives? I think that they should go up. We should increase the amount of renewables we have. We need to look at interconnections as well, electrical ones, but also for gas as well, perhaps, because right now gas is not the solution for the Green Deal, but the Commission has said that it could be a transition, but it can't continue to be Russian gas because that is financing, buying that is financing the massacre of the Ukrainian people. In the Iberian Peninsula, we can provide gas, liquefied natural gas, but we don't have the interconnector to allow us to do it. Some things need to be looked at again, and is the Commission going to give us a new proposal which will bring these two objectives together?
Wallace for the left.
Thanks, Pascal. Vice President, a study by Scientists for Global Responsibility, together with the Conflict and Environment Observatory, commissioned by the Left Group last year, estimated conservatively that the carbon footprint of EU military expenditure is approximately 24.8 million tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent annually. This is roughly the same as the amount of CO2 emitted by 14 million cars every year. Member States are supposed to regularly report their military greenhouse gas emissions to the UNFCCC, though through national reports and a combined report for the EU. But this is voluntary. Reliable data on military emissions is more crucial than ever at a time when military expenditure is increasing in Europe at a frightening rate. The EEAS Climate Defence Roadmap states, for the EU and its member states to continuously show leadership in international climate and environment policy and actions, the EU will work towards including defence aspects in the national determined contributions. My one question for you, Mr Timmermans, do you support the inclusion of military emissions in NDCs? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And the last speaker for the second round, Edina Todd for non-attached.
Thank you, Chair. Dear Mr Timmermans, Europe has faced with high energy prices many times in the past. Today, due to the war in Ukraine, the price rise happens again, while green transformation of the energy system is underway. It is clear that we need to design a fair and forward-looking response. But what is the EU's response? One day, you say member states have to give up coal. A few weeks later, you say coal not taboo, as EU seeks Russian gas exit. I think we need a more coherent climate policy. We need to move towards renewables. However, we cannot step back from natural gas from one day to another, as we need to secure energy supply. It is of utmost importance to acknowledge the role of nuclear energy too. And my question is the following. Based on the current critical situation, do you consider to provide additional climate funds for the member states? And how would you achieve that no citizen will pay higher energy prices? Thank you.
France, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. A lot of questions about the social cohesion, and let me be very clear, because there's also, I'll combine it with the questions on the emissions trading system. I'm a bit surprised that there's still these stories about manipulation in the emissions trading system. We've analysed this, and also it's been independently analysed. There is no indication of manipulation. And by the way, who would have manipulated that in the last couple of weeks when the price is going down? Who would do that? This is simply a response to what's happening in the market, and the ETS is functioning. It is a functioning system. It has functioned, and we believe that the introduction of an ETS2 system is also the best way to protect the most vulnerable. And I think since we will be with you in a very, very complicated discussion about this, because it is complicated, I think, Chair, we might share with you the analyses we've made internally in the Commission on ETS2 and what the instruments are we could use with the Social Fund to protect the 20% most vulnerable people in Europe, who are responsible for 9% of the emissions. And I think at least if you have our analysis, we can have perhaps a better informed discussion about whether this is the way to go or not, because I believe we will have to take some decisions. There is an increase of emissions in transport. There is a lack of decrease of emissions in the built environment. We absolutely need to tackle that. And as I've always said, if you have a better solution, please let us know. If you would be willing to analyse our solution, and then perhaps we can come to collectively to better decisions. But I want to put my argument fully on the table with all the background in it, because I think we need to overcome that we create an ideological discussion about yes or no ETS. I want to be as practical as possible, and I especially want to be able to prove that this is the best way to compensate the 20% most vulnerable citizens in our society and compensate them before the introduction already of the ETS2 system. But it's then up to you to decide how to weigh our arguments. I hope this could be helpful to look into this issue. On the interconnections, we need to speed up the electrical interconnection between the Iberian Peninsula and the rest of Europe. I mean, if you have an excess of production of renewables and you can't bring them to other customers in Europe, that's a shame. That's a shame. That's not what we need now. So indeed, this is something we will be promoting, obviously. Now, also, in terms of coal, let me be very clear. There is no future in coal. Simply, not just because it creates emissions that are completely unacceptable. There is no economic future in coal. If you compare the price of renewables to the price of coal, it makes no sense. But at the same time, in this extraordinary situation we are in, there are scenarios thinkable that member states will not want to use gas at the same level in the transition and then would be stuck a bit longer with coal. But if that is combined with a much swifter introduction of renewables, for climate that can still be a good solution, but we will have to look at every individual situation. Now, of course, the high energy prices has a huge political impact because this is something nobody can avoid and everybody is touched by it. Just filling up your car or looking at the new contracts you get for the heating of your houses, etc. It is a politically incredibly complicated situation, and we have to try and put our member states in the best possible position to address it, with all the instruments and all the flexibility we can provide within the instruments. I don't have the impulse to change the PCI list. Let me be very clear about this. By the way, the PCI list is also something we negotiated with Parliament. It's Parliament who asked us to grandfather the gas projects. Or am I mistaken here? I think it is. And there is some logic in this. We have a lack of interconnectors. Also in the gas that we will need in the intermediary period. And if you can then make these investments in such a way that this infrastructure is suitable for other densities, in other words, for hydrogen in the future, it is an investment also in the future energy system. Hydrogen will be a big part of Europe's future energy system, as I think ammonia as well. So and biomethane, which was also mentioned by some of you. So we need to. There is a huge potential for more bioenergy, and we will also come out with some ideas about that tomorrow. Yes, we need to find answers on the nuclear threat. We're working very closely with the International Atomic Energy Agency to monitor what is happening in Ukraine. The completely irresponsible behavior of Putin and his cronies puts us all at danger. But it also, that's the only slightly redeeming factor, it puts him and his country also enormously at danger, especially in this time of the year with predominantly eastern winds. He would hurt himself and his country in a tremendous way if he makes a huge mistake there. But risks are being taken, and I hope we can, together with the International Atomic Energy Agency, provide the right level of protection. And I can understand that you say, well, are you actually now serious about this transition? Are you going to speed it up? Well, wait for tomorrow. I think we will. But we will need your help. We will need Parliament to support this. Now, of course, we need to reduce very quickly our dependency on Russian energy, and we can do that. But some of it is not overnight. We will, in some areas, need a couple of years to get us there. And by the way, this is not just because the German Chancellor came out very clearly on this today, but the reality is that there's quite a number of our member states who would get into real trouble if overnight all the energy would no longer be provided from Russia. With gas, we can manage more or less, but if everything would stop overnight, it would be a problem. So we need to make sure, in doing this, we don't do more harm to ourselves than we do to Putin. I mean, some will call this realpolitik. I think this is common sense. We shouldn't disrupt our own society now that we need our society to be as united as possible. And let me be very clear. Well, two things I want to say about Poland because it was addressed so clearly. I have seldom felt so emotional than the moment when I saw the Polish people receiving the refugees at the border with tea, taking them into their homes. Incredible, incredible. And that makes me a proud European, to see those Europeans taking care of other Europeans who are being bombed out of their houses. And Poland deserves a huge compliment and full solidarity. Refugees need to be accepted in all member states, without buts or ifs, just accepted. Not long procedures, accepted. They are fleeing for their lives. But the second remark I want to make, also Poland has sent more than 1 trillion zloty in the last years to Russia for energy. So it's not that it's just 1 or 2 member states, it's a more systemic problem we need to address, also Poland, all of us. And I think this is something that we have a, well, you can say no, but it's the facts, I'm sorry. You can't dispute the facts, I'm afraid. But we have to make sure that all of us, move quickly in the right direction now. And I think the political support and the societal support for this is clear. On the military greenhouse gas emissions, I've been talking to NATO about this, but now we have other priorities in talking to NATO. A month ago, where there was strong willingness also for NATO member states to look at both the threats for our security coming from the climate crisis, but also at their own carbon footprint in operating in military. It's not my invention, it's NATO itself that comes up with these ideas, supported by NATO member states. So I think also there we will have a closer cooperation. But most importantly, of course, in the security domain, it is analysing very precisely where the security threats are linked to the climate crisis, which I believe is something that will increase in the years to come.
Thank you. So we move to the last round of questions. We still have 10 members. We are running 10 minutes late, so please stick to the 1 minute. We start with EPP, Maria Spiraki.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor, and thank you very much, Executive Vice President, for finding time to be with us. I will be very brief, starting with the joint European response to the energy prices that we all need. And according to Le Monde, maybe there is a part of RRF that will be used as an instrument, a specific instrument, in order to start tackling the issue of prices. If you can give us a sense how will it work. And my second question is, if you in the Commission are planning to do some changes in the guidelines of the state aid issue, that they are already in the pipeline, concerning the acceleration of deployment of renewables and also the acceleration and further support to important projects of common interest on the interconnection. I would give you an example. It is the electricity interconnection between Greece and Egypt. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you. For SND, Mohamed Chain.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Executive Vice President. So, in conclusion, we need to transform our energy system. We need to invest in energy efficiency, invest in renewables, improve energy security, improve interconnectivity. So we need a more efficient, sustainable, better connected and fairer energy system. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have that. It's called the European Green Deal. And realpolitik also means to look further than 2 or 3 next winters. What will we do with the current energy source that we have? In the Netherlands, we say, do not throw away your old shoes before you have new ones. But we have a plan for that as well. It will come tomorrow. The only regret I have is that we could have started with decarbonization much earlier. It would have placed us in a much better position, especially in relation to Putin. I wish you the best of luck. The road to decarbonization is long. We will meet some bumps, but please don't panic. We have a good plan, we have good leaders, and we will be stronger after this crisis. Thank you very much.
Thank you. For Renew, Jan Huitema.
Dank u wel, voorzitter. Dank u wel, commissaris. De hele avond spreken wij over...
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Schatten.
So, this evening, we're speaking about energy. Are we not overestimating the possibilities of the fact that there might be food shortages? I'm thinking above all the people in Ukraine, people who live in the countryside, people who are now displaced. They're not going to have any cereals. There's not going to be any seeds for the fields. There's going to be food shortage. A third of the cereal imports of the entire world come from Ukraine. And if that is not available, what's going to happen? We could run the difficulty that people aren't going to be able to harvest in Ukraine. What are we going to do in the EU? We have to see our experience from North Africa, perhaps, and perhaps, yes, we should use less artificial fertilizer. However, we have to think and find alternatives. There's organic material available that we could use, but some of it we can't use because of our policy.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Executive Vice President Timmermans, for being here today and also for your powerful words yesterday evening on German TV. I really appreciate it. I have very concrete questions. What will the Commission do to support Member States in accelerating the Green Deal, in accelerating the build-out of renewables? For example, will there be a template for the implementation of the active consumers' rights from the Clean Energy Package? Will there be a fast-track procedure for renewables and efficiency support schemes in DG Competition, where the new renewables law of Germany will have to wait until the end year for being approved? That is not up to date. Very sorry. Will there be an IPCEI for a gigawatt factory for photovoltaics in Europe so that we don't exchange the dependency from Russian fossil fuels with the dependency from Chinese solar panels? Will there be guidelines on biodiversity and renewables for Member States so that lawsuits will no longer slow down the ramping up of renewables and permitting? All those questions would be very dear to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There is no speaker for ID, and we move to ECR, Anna Zaliewska.
Panie Przewodniczący, Panie Wiceprzewodniczący, mówił Pan, że Europa powinna...
Vice President, you said that Europe should be resistant and should be balanced. It is not. We've got war and we've got crazy energy prices that change not week over week, but day over day. We've got absolute economic chaos, no prospects, and the Green and Fit for 55, which has been structured against the backbone of Nord Stream 1 and 2. Nord Stream 1 doesn't exist anymore. Nord Stream 2 is still there. As you rightly quoted, Chancellor Scholz said he would not give up imports of fossil fuels from Russia in spite of what he's heard from our colleagues from Germany. We need to do some serious analysis. We are talking about the future of Europeans. Let's not say to Europeans that we are going to have a stable economy based on the wind farms. We need to take a second look on at carbon, at coal. We need to look at coal as an element that allows us to use modern technologies. The European Commission turns a blind eye to it.
Thank you very much, dear Vice Chair. Dear Chair, dear Vice President Timmermans, thank you for being here with us. The Russian invasion of Ukraine should not be a motive to delay the application of Green Deal. On the opposite, we need to accelerate our efforts to develop clean and affordable energy, renewables and energy efficiency. However, we need to put a lot of emphasis on security of supply. And for security of supply, you need a strong internal market. And very happy that you have already said that you want to increase the level of coverage on the interconnections in Europe. So I have a concrete question to you. One of the important for my country, Portugal, as colleagues have said already today from Portugal and Spain, are the interconnections through the Pyrenees between Spain and France, that electricity, gas, and in the future hydrogen. Is the Commission willing to review and including in the future in the PCI list these projects as projects of common interest? Thank you very much.
Thank you. We move to Nicolas González-Casares for SND.
Gracias, presidente. Gracias, vicepresidente.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Vice President Timmermans, for coming today. We're all very worried, and thank you for organising this energy debate to ENVI as well. I think the winds are stronger, the wind and sun are stronger than Putin's hand, and I think this should also strengthen our policies. I firmly believe that moving forward in renewables, increasing our autonomy, and doing so will make better in the future when it comes to energy and respect for the planet. But it's also true that we do have issues. We have issues telling our citizens that as we take that road, they're going to have to pay more for energy. So we have a short-term problem right now with this crisis that needs responses. And I think tomorrow is a very important day, Executive Vice President, to look at what responses we have so that citizens aren't seeing energy prices climb even more every day, particularly electricity. I think we need to really disconnect gas and electricity prices. That's vital. And it's not just poorer citizens, but also small and medium-sized enterprises, which also need support. I could just like to say one more thing about the PCI list. I don't think it's the worst possible.
3 minutes. So we move to Renew and Andreas Glück.
Thank you very much. And because Pascal was speaking so good English, I will not speak in German, I will speak in English as well. So first of all, thank you for your strong words. I have to admit, we are afraid, at least I am, but fear is a bad advisor. So we must think, and then we have to go for the action. So my question, do we have to adjust our Fit for 55 package? I'm a surgeon. I see things from the practical side. We can't just kick something out of our portfolio if we don't know how we can substitute. So no hasty reaction, but thinking. 3 examples. We have to be stronger when it comes to renewables, storage and smart grids, of course, as well as infrastructure in gas and electricity. But other examples, CBAM, for example. The world holds together at this moment. Do we really want to tackle our allies with CBAM in this situation now? Question. Then, next point, Energy Efficiency Directive. On one hand, because of lack of fossils, we certainly can raise our level of ambition at the moment. But on the other hand, if we can't substitute coal through gas, maybe we have to lower the level of ambition at the same time. So do you believe we need some sort of a moratorium, not to weaken Green Deal, not to lower the ambition everywhere, but to adjust it and even to make it maybe stronger in some fields?
Thank you. We move to TMS for the Greens.
Thank you very much, dear Chair, and also thank you, dear Executive Vice President, to be with us this evening. I was also watching you yesterday on the German TV. Very good. Thank you for that. So my concern is really that the Russian invasion of Ukraine is being used really as a pretext to attack both biodiversity strategy and the farm-to-fork strategy and also their related targets. However, abandoning those targets would be totally counterproductive. In order to wean ourselves of artificial inputs which are destroying our soil and our agri-systems and therefore the productivity, we need more than ever and urgently the transition to more sustainable ways of farming. Productivity gains are threatened by the collapse in biodiversity, including pollinators in our soil system. A great Mather study shows that the agroecological system are more productive than the conventional one. That's why I really want to hear you. I know you were speaking about it when I came in the room, but really we urge you to stick to the farm to fork strategy and to the biodiversity strategy, as they are essential in terms of acting to save the climate and the nature, and also allowing us to be more independent in terms of food security. And keeping those targets is the only responsible thing to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Again, question of fairness. And then the last speaker is Catherine Chabot for Renew.
Est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Oui, vas-y.
Hear me? Yes, we can. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Timmermans, for your very strong statements. I have a couple of questions and a point to make. I was working in the Indian Ocean some time ago, and a vessel broke down, and we had to sail on wind energy and sun energy. If you told me at the start that I wouldn't have fossil fuels on this world trip, I wouldn't have set off. I managed because I was convinced it was possible, but also because I was very careful with my energy usage. So on the plan that you're proposing tomorrow, nobody is talking about energy sobriety, energy saving. I think this is a very strong message for our citizens. Second question, something else that I learned from the seas. The EU today is a vessel which needs to sail on the energies that it has. And with renewable energies, I think we also need to try to develop the energy we have around us. This is also a message to convey, particularly to more isolated territories. Will you be also talking about energy mix in your plan? Thank you.
There's only one thing that can get us into trouble in the years to come, and that is if we are divided. It is not for nothing that Putin has invested 20 years and an incredible amount of money to divide us. And how surprised must he have been and sad to see that all this investment has gone to naught because of his own behavior. And I believe we also, when we discuss the future of Fit for 55, the Green Deal, I will do my utmost to make sure we are not divided and try and address many of the issues which come from different parts as best I can. Some of the answers, but many questions that I cannot answer now. Some of the answers will be in our document tomorrow. Some will need to be elaborated as of then. We will, in Repower EU, come with some ideas also in terms of how we work more closely with our neighbourhood. We will need huge amounts of green hydrogen in the future that we cannot produce ourselves. We don't want to be in another situation of depending too much on one or a few energy suppliers. So the fact that green hydrogen is going to be a global commodity, also developed in large parts of Africa and elsewhere, is a huge opportunity for us to diversify and to make sure we also help Africa develop itself. I think green hydrogen and ammonia are going to be a tremendous opportunity on the basis of very cheap solar energy and offshore wind. Of course, it's always easy to say we should have made this transition earlier. That's right, but we are where we are, and we need to make the best of the situation we're in now. And I think we can do that. I bow to Jan Huytema and his analysis of farm to fork. He's absolutely right. I only mentioned one small element. He is right. We need to put our young farmers, especially our young farmers, in a position to use high-tech in a much higher level, because that is what agriculture needs everywhere in the world. And we need to spread that message also beyond Europe. He is right that I was listening last night to a farmer, a Dutch farmer. His name is Huizinga, not Huytema. And if you have the time, any of you, he's sent by his Ukrainian colleagues to spread the message to us. If you have time, I haven't been able to find the time yet, but I will speak to him this week, and I would encourage you to speak to him. He will come with a very powerful message about what is happening in Ukraine. And there are serious risks if the farmers in Ukraine cannot start to sow the crop now in the next couple of weeks. There will be a problem with food shortages. Not so much for the European Union, but many other customers of Ukraine, also in the developing world, where they have high levels of birth rates and where they need desperately the food production out of Ukraine and Russia, by the way, but especially Ukraine. So there is a problem there. Mr. Huytema is right, and I would encourage you to listen to the message, and then we can see together what we can do to address that issue. Ms. Paulus had many questions I hope will be addressed. She is right, we need to look at procedures. She is right, we need to speed them up. Also, Federal Minister Habeck has been making this point to me almost on a daily basis, and he is right. If the energy transition, Germany is investing, I think, north of 200 billion in the energy transition in the coming years. That money needs to be spent, be able to spend, and you need the people to build that, you need the permits to build that, you need the facilities to build that, and we need to facilitate that more than we have in the past. And I will really engage with all national governments that want to speed that up to make it possible for them and to make sure we apply the European rules in the most swift way, or else we change the European rules. And many of the questions you asked will hopefully be answered also in our document tomorrow. The Iberian interconnectors, I've already said that, are extremely important for us. They have to, again, because I find it insupportable that you have an axis of production of renewables that cannot find its way into the rest of Europe because there's no connection. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. So we really highlight that as well. I think we don't have the luxury of having a moratorium, frankly. We need to proceed, but we also need to adapt where we need to adapt. If there are things we need to change, to change direction or to change intensity, we need to do that. The concept of sobriété énergétique, what I would say is, it's like with our food. We throw away more than 20% of our food. That should change. We throw away a lot of our energy as well. That should also change. There's so much energy is lost because of the bad quality of housing. So much energy is lost because of old machines, old procedures. There is so much to be gained in energy efficiency in the years to come. And that is also a way of reducing our dependency on imported fossil fuels. And we need to pick that up with speed. Finally, but this is more the international aspect, there are so many, especially small island states, that could provide for their own energy through solar and wind, especially with the new technologies, foldable turbines, etc., that are impervious to erratic weather patterns. They are paying incredibly high prices already for fossil fuels because of the remoteness of where they are. They could be completely self-sufficient if we help them in the coming years with renewable energy, and it is a good opportunity for European industry that is world-leading in especially wind technology, and becoming again world-leading in photovoltaic technology. But let me end where I started in my final introduction. Friends, it is of the utmost importance that we are not divided. And even we have big political differences in this parliament between countries, between political groups, but we don't have the luxury to let that cripple us in the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So a lot to see tomorrow in the communication, and the next ENVI meeting is on the 14th of March on the IPCC report. Thank you very much.